take two, because apparently my microphone was off the first time. Watch the UFC 323 press conference featuring Murad Dvalishvili, Peter Yan, Alejandro Pantoja, Joshua Van, Brandon Moreno, Tatsuro Taira, Henry Cejudo, Peyton Talbot, Jan Blachowicz, and Bogdan Guskov. Dana doesn't show up to the presser, even though UFC 323 is one of the most stacked, if not the most stacked card of the year, and it's the last pay-per-view of the year. But it's Dana White. I guess he's got something better to do, right? He's got to gamble away millions at the casino, right? Because that's what's important to him, rather than taking care of his own sport, right? But John Anik comes out dressing like one of those old rich celebrities that tries to fit in with the young guns, with a white tee and a weird red jacket. Just ends up looking like an old hippie. Marab starts yapping after he gets asked a basic question from the low quality reporters that the UFC has, and he calmly asks about him and Peter Yan's living arrangements and explains to the crowd the concept of immigration for the umpteenth time in his career. Marab sounds like he's mumbling. It sounds less confident than normal. His face is looking real sunken in from the weight cut. Definitely seems like it's been getting to him. And he even said that during fight week a couple times on his posts. And he also just sounds very drained. Doesn't seem to have much energy. And his usual cheesy grin wasn't visible during this press conference. We only got to see it one time. Marab says that indecision machine, brother. Peter Yan says, well, I'm going to knock you out, basically. And he says it in English. And Peter Yan, we need to get Peter Yan speaking English more. We need to teach him more English, because he sounds very villainous when he's speaking English with that deep Russian accent. And then he also says that Marab only beat me because I had one arm in that first fight. And Marab starts shouting and mumbling at the same time, and he got triggered by Yan saying that he only beat him because he was injured, and saying that on top of that he was still able to defend a bunch of his takedowns, even though Marab shot 49 takedowns, most of them got defended. Peter just continues to rage, but he's like, more, ask more. And Marab asks, what excuses will you have this time? What excuses will you have this time? Oh, say something. And he's just getting really angry at basically nothing. Marab just gets triggered so easily. I feel like he doesn't... you can rage bait him, and he won't understand that it's rage bait. He's never going to figure it out. Because Marab, he's a great champ and all, but he's dumb. He is just dumb. And he just doesn't understand. And so Peter was just kind of verbally bullying him the entire time. And not the entire time, but quite a few times. Definitely got on Marab's nerves. Peter doesn't understand what Marab's asking if he has any excuses. So Marab's raging. And say, what excuse do you have this time? And Peter's like, I don't understand what he's saying. And then it's translated, and Peter says, well, I'm in the best shape of my life, so this time's going to be different. I believe him, man. Because his arm, he was one-armed in that fight, man. If you know, you know. He was injured. I know a lot of fighters fight injured, but from what I know, it was a pretty serious injury. And he wants to go out there and prove that he's better than ever. Marab says, Marab says good luck to Yan, and he forces a grin after getting triggered about basically nothing. And then Cejudo decides to randomly acknowledge that he's a Mexican. What a shocker. He claims America and is, said multiple times that, he doesn't claim Mexico. But now he does. And, starts speaking Spanish and stuff. Just pretty much to get it, I think, to get a clip and to, make up with Moreno. Maybe it's genuine. Maybe it's not. He says he wants to bury the hatchet in his past that he has in Moreno because, he ducked Moreno back in the day and dipped out of the sport for a while. Left the weight class. It sounded kind of fake to me and forced, but, that's just what Cejudo sounds like to me. I just don't really think he's a genuine guy, but I could be wrong. Pantoja yaps about being an old school fighter, and he praises the new gen, and he does this about 5 or 6 times after being asked the same question about 5 or 6 times, right? And a guy asks what type of fight Pantoja expects from Van during the fight, as Van's opponents all looked like they got put through a wood chipper. And Pantoja says, a lot. Pantoja, as I was watching the presser, if you go and watch a press conference, you can see Pantoja visibly, he's just turning into a zombie. Zombie Pantoja, new mythical fighter. That'll be interesting. A reporter brings up that he thinks Pantoja's former opponents gave Pantoja too much respect in the octagon. Cejudo eggs on the crowd to boo him, and it sounded like there was about 10 people in the crowd, and I was kind of disappointed in that crowd. There wasn't really much atmosphere, and the only point of the crowd is to add atmosphere and hype to the fights. There was none. I don't know. It didn't sound like many people were in the crowd, and it sounded very wimpy. It's a very wimpy crowd. But he says, Cejudo says he's gonna pass on the king of cringe. Basically, he's gonna pass on the torch of being the king of cringe to Peyton Talbot, which is interesting, I guess. Bogdan Guskov is dressed up like Agent 47. Says because he wants to spice things up at the presser for the fans. Yet the fans don't care because there's no atmosphere at this presser. But Bogdan, he looked nice in his Agent 47 outfit. The gloves, got the suit, got the tie, and Jan Plovich, cracked a joke and saying, I'm 10 years older than you, and I still have my hair. I don't remember what else he said, but yeah, they're chill. And that's all the interaction they have. And then Merab says that Peter Yan is welcome to the jacuzzi. And after that, Peter, he starts rage baiting. He starts rage baiting hard, and he basically calls Merab gay and calls him an incel. He doesn't say those words, but that's the point that he was driving there, and says that he's only sees Merab with boys in his jacuzzi, and Merab easily gets triggered by that. Peter smiles and continues to say, honestly, I haven't seen you with a girl at all. And, it's pretty good rage bait from Peter. And I think it's especially funny because, Merab has been seeing a lot of different videos and pictures of different women on Instagram. So I think it makes it even funnier, and it makes Merab even more confused by it because, as I've said, Merab isn't really a smart person. So, when you confuse him, it just kind of looks embarrassing and humiliating for him. And, Peter had a lot of fun. It's kind of humiliating Merab anytime he spoke to him. John Anik says that he believes that Merab is on the brink of GOAT status. That was interesting. Usually don't see someone like it's not often where, someone like Anik says that, so that's cool, I guess. It is cool. Moreno appreciates that, Cejudo buried the hatchet. Even though earlier, it seemed like when Cejudo tried to bury the hatchet, Moreno seemed kind of weirded out by it, in my opinion. But then it seems like he thought about it, and then he was like, yeah, I appreciate it. And then they shake hands. Joshua Van says nothing important, but he's a chill guy, and he sounds kind of cool when he says the nothing important things. I wish the reporters would ask good questions. This presser wasn't terrible like most are. It was actually all right. It was fine. And, the questions were not as bad as normal. They were fine, but we still need better reporters to get these fighters to come out of their shells. You know what I mean? Pantoja starts praising Henry Cejudo, and then he starts yapping about other stuff. And then Joshua Van starts smiling and shadowboxing in his seat as Pantoja just waffles about how he wants to feel Joshua Van in the octagon. So that's interesting. I'm sure we'll see Pantoja in the jacuzzi. Pantoja asked about how it feels to fight the new gen guy for the 5th time at the press conference, and Pantoja didn't say anything new, of course. And then the reporters, for some reason, try and see if Pantoja and Merab will consider moving weight classes, even though they both said on multiple occasions that they want to stay in their respective weight classes. Multiple times. Reporters asked them this multiple times for the past year. And they keep saying no. Pantoja has said that he wants to be the definitive go-to flyweight. He wants to, surpass Demetrius Johnson, and, he wants to continue racking up title defenses, so that makes sense to me. And, Pantoja's really set on that. It's all about flyweight GOAT status. And Merab, he just feels comfortable at 35, I guess, from the sounds of it. Although, and also Aljo's at 145. He doesn't want to fight Aljo. And Aljo's his boy, so he thinks that Aljo's going to get the title at some point, I'm sure. Anyways, Cejudo talks about, giving back to the sport and sharing knowledge with other fighters. Praised the UFC, says it'll be the greatest sport on earth. Reporter asks Cejudo if Peyton can learn anything from Cejudo during the fight. And Cejudo doesn't really respond with anything. He's like, yeah, sure, man. But I'm not going to reveal any of my game plan. That's not the best Cejudo impression. Listen, dude. But, Cejudo tells fans not to legally stream fights, which, what a fucking loser, man. Telling us not to legally stream fights. He's saying we gotta, you gotta pay the, don't illegally stream the fights, dude. You gotta pay for them legally, man. No one's paying $80 for that shit. Plus, that the Paramount deal is coming soon, so we won't have to pay. Or illegally stream. But right now, we'll illegally stream. Peter Yan continues to humiliate Merab a bit more because he hasn't had enough, of course. And he says that, he finds Merab's videos funny. And he also says, I don't know if he's intentionally funny, if he's funny on purpose. And he says, but I especially like the one where he jumps headfirst into the ice. And Rob just looks at him like, what the fuck, man? And he tries to say something, but no words come out, and he's just dumbfounded. He's just like, why would you bring that up? And Rob just looks embarrassed, and audience was boring. If you're gonna boo someone, boo him. They were being wimps about booing Cejudo and Talbot. And when they start facing off, Merab looked pretty drained. He looked drained in the face-off, and he looked kind of, small compared to normal. Maybe Peter's just bigger than a bit bigger compared to Merab than I remembered. But Peter looked like a Chad in his, Russian tracksuit get-up that he had on, compared to Merab and his nice, tailored dress suit. Merab was not really smiling during the face-off, and it wasn't really anger. It's more just like he just looked drained, and he just doesn't look like he wants to be there necessarily. And this is going to influence my pick on that fight, and I'll get more to that in my prediction video. Sayonara.